Ladies, we're studying Parashat Vayigash. We'll just say a few ideas on the Parashah, most dramatic Parashah. The Parashah where Yosef finally reveals himself to the brothers and says, Ani Yosef, I am Yosef. It's quite emotional no matter how many times we read the story. And even though we know the end of the story, but every time we read it, it's quite dramatic and very emotional to say the least. But I want to pick up from last week's Parashah in order to get the proper perspective of what's going on in this Parashah. In last week's Parashah, Yosef frames the brothers by placing his goblet, in Hebrew they call it the Gabiyah, into Binyamin's pouch. And then Yosef calls the brothers back and says, what type of business? You stole my Gaviyah. And the brothers say, what are you talking about? We didn't steal anything. As a matter of fact, we returned the money the first time. You think we're going to steal from you now? The money that was found in our pouches, we came on our own voluntary nature to give it back to you. Now you think we're going to steal something? So Yosef says, no, I want to make an investigation. Yosef opens up the pouch of Binyamin finally, and there it is. I told you, look at that, you stole, you took it. So Yehuda, who's representing the brothers, sees what happened. He says, we can't say anything, you got us. We're guilty. God has found our sin. Something's wrong here. We commit to be your slave. All of us. Take us all into incarceration. We'll all work for you. You can imprison us. We accept anything. So Yosef says, no. I don't want all you to be my slaves. Just give me one of you. Just give me Binyamin. Just give me Binyamin to be the slave, and that'll be a fair settlement. Now you'd expect Yehuda to be thrilled. I mean, he was offering 10. Yosef comes along and says, no, we don't need 10, just give me one. Comes this week's Parashah, and Yehuda goes wild. Vayigash, you love Yehuda. Yehuda's confrontational. He says, what are you doing? You're making games with us. You framed us. You set us up. What do you want from us? You're playing games. So all the rabbis ask, last week's Parashah, Yehuda was bending over backwards. Take us all as slaves. And then all of a sudden, one pasuk later, Yehuda changes his whole attitude, and now he wants to kill Yosef. What happened in a few pasukim? So the rabbis explain that the brothers understood that everything that happened in their life is in the context of their deeds, their good deeds or bad deeds. And if God is doing something to them, it must be because they did something to warrant that. So when all these things were happening with the goblet and with the money that was found in their pouches, the brothers right away said, hold it, why is God doing this to us? Yosef said, we're spies. What did we do wrong? So they came to the conclusion, must be because we sold our brother Yosef. We sold him as a slave. Therefore, God's coming to punish us, and therefore He's selling us as slaves. Finished, it's clear. They finally came to the conclusion that they were wrong, and they came to regret what they did with the brothers. So that's why Yehuda says, fine. If the goblet was found in one of our pouches, we're all willing to become your slaves, because that's the punishment, which fits the crime. We sold our brothers as slaves, so we'll go as slaves. Once Yosef says, no, you guys can go home. I don't want you. I want Binyamin. So now Yehuda says, hold it. What did Binyamin do? Binyamin wasn't around when they sold Yosef. Binyamin had nothing to do with the sale of Yosef. Binyamin is the most innocent when it comes to the sale of Yosef. So must be if Yosef is trying to incarcerate only Binyamin, that means it's nothing to do with our sin. So if it has nothing to do with our sin, we don't have to accept it passively. Now we don't have to sit back. Now we have to fight. Now we have to scream. If Yosef would have said, okay, you know what, all 10 of you can be slaves, right? They would have said, fine, that's God, Hashem's punishing us, we accept it. But once Yosef says, I don't want you to be slaves, you can go home, I just want Binyamin. So the brother said, Binyamin? What's Binyamin? Binyamin's innocent, he did nothing in that sale of Yosef. So must be you're just playing games with us. This is not a signal from God of any guilt of a sin. This is a king of Egypt trying to play games, trying to, to play moves. So that's why Yehuda changes his attitude very quickly. If you accept the 10, makes sense. But if you don't accept the 10, if you accept only Binyamin, it doesn't make sense to me anymore. Therefore, Binyamin is going to be saved by Yehuda's great confrontation that he had. And in the middle of the confrontation, Yosef couldn't control himself anymore. I mean, it says he was so emotionally broken down from what the brothers were saying. We have a younger brother, and if he doesn't come home, our father's going to get sick. This happened to him once already. We had another brother, and he died, and our father still hasn't recovered from it, and now you're going to do it to him a second time by not letting Binyamin come home. So as they're telling him all these things, they're pushing all his buttons. They don't know they're talking to Yosef. They think they're talking to some Arab. But Yosef is Yosef. So when he's hearing all these things, he's getting so emotional, and he's thinking, my father and my this. So finally he tells everybody to leave the room, and he talks to the brothers face to face. And the famous line he tells them, as he's crying, Ani Yosef, I am Yosef, Ha'od Avi Hai, is my father still alive? And it says the brothers were dumbfounded. And the brothers had their mouths hanging open, and they didn't know what to say. It means that's the last thing they expect the emperor of Egypt to say, I am Yosef. And then he says, my father's still alive. So every rabbi tries to give an interpretation. What was Yosef's question? Is my father still alive? Didn't they say it 100 times? Our father, he's an old man, our poor father. Binyamin, you can't do that to the father. The old man, please, our father. If there's anything, Yosef knows that Yaakov is still alive. So why that question? That's not the question he should be asking. I am Yosef, is my father still alive? It's obvious, of course. Didn't we tell you 100 times? So we've said different answers in the past. Today we'll offer a new answer. Based on a story that I heard. There was a story of a child that his father, true story, his father had abandoned the family. Poor child. Father picked up one day, doesn't want to be in the house anymore. He walked off and left the poor child orphaned with a father that's alive. And you can imagine the toll that takes on a young child to see such a thing and to live in such conditions. And in school, his behavior definitely was a result of this broken child, of what happened to him. And he was not in this world. He wasn't paying attention, and he was unruly, and he was wild, and he acted up. And of course, the teachers didn't know what to do with such a child. And they try to love him, but with all the love, and the teacher invites him to the house, and they try to compensate for all the love that the child is missing, but it wouldn't work. The child was in a different head. So finally, the teacher decided nothing you can do with this kid. It's disruptive to the other kids in the class. He has to go to school, so they put him in the back row, and the teacher really forgot about him. He's in his own world, as we said. They get to this parasha. So the rabbi is teaching the pasuk, and he says, boys, what does it mean when Yosef says, Ha'od Avi Hai, is my father still alive? Didn't Yosef know? Didn't they tell him? Why is he asking that question? All of a sudden, that boy in the back row pipes up from his seat and says, Rabbi, I have to answer. He says, what do you have to answer? He says, Yosef knew that his father was alive. He wasn't asking that question. He was asking, Ha'od Avi Hai. I know your father's still alive, but is my father still alive? Which means I've been away for 22 years. Does my father still remember me? Does my father still know me? Does my father still care about me? Does my father still love me? Does he appreciate me? I know Avichem Chai. I know your father's love. You told me that 100 times. I'm not asking you that question. I'm asking you, Ha'od Avi Chai. Is my father still alive? Is he still a father to me? Does he still think about me? And this child over here was not asking and interpreting an explanation of a pasuk in the Torah. He was actually interpreting his life. This child was calling out in class and was saying, "Ha'od avi hai, is my father still alive?" To be such a victim of such a delinquent parent. The child called out and says, "Does my father still love me? Does my father still care for me?" And from his own life experience, he was able to give a brilliant, a novel, an eye-opening insight on what Yosef was asking. And this is really the question that we have to ask ourselves: are we still alive for our children? You know, we live in such a busy time where everybody's always coming and going, and we have so much personal obligations and social obligations and making a living, etc., that if there was ever a generation where the children are being denied of the most basic right of a child to have parents, it's in our generation. It's a generation where children are being brought up, unfortunately, by domestic help and by babysitters, and because parents are busy. And I'm not, God forbid, giving a rebuke. It's not my place. I'm actually talking to myself. I'm also quite busy. But that's unfortunately the weakness of our generation. And when we come to this parasha and we hear the words, "Ha'od avi hai," is my father still alive? Is he alive for me? You have to ask yourselves, are you alive for your children? Are you there for your children? Do you love your children? Are you around for them when you need them? This is the most pressing question. And I can't tell you the importance of what it means to a child. For this child to come up with such a chidush, it's only because he was a victim of what it means not to have a father. There's a fantastic thought on the words that Yosef said, "Ani Yosef." 2 words. I want you to put those 2 words into the proper perspective. When the brothers heard those 2 words, they were dumbfounded. They were shocked. They were speechless. They couldn't open their mouth. It says, "Velo yachilu echav la'anot oto." They were paralyzed. What did those 2 words mean to them? The brothers were living for 22 years after they sold Yosef, and they were witnessing a lot of very funny occurrences that were taking place. They saw famine hit the land of Canaan. They saw themselves having to go down for food. They saw their father suffering. They come down to Egypt, they're suspected as spies, even though they weren't. Then already they're taken to the palace and they found that the money was returned to them, and Yosef suspects them for thieves. Then the goblet. Then he wants to take Binyamin. Yehuda guaranteed his olam haba for Binyamin, and now Binyamin's go. So the brothers are asking themselves the question, what's going on over here? What's God doing? Nothing makes sense over here. But in 2 words that Yosef said, all those 22 years now became understood. When he said, "Ani Yosef," I am Yosef, now everything clicked. That's why there was a famine. We came down. This is part of God's master plan to bring the Jews down to Egypt, to start the exile. Yosef is the king in order to supply food for our family. When we come down, we'll come down with red carpet treatment. That's why he suspected us, in order to get us to bring back Binyamin, so we could bow down to him, so the dreams will come true. In 2 words, Ani Yosef, all of a sudden, all the questions that they had on what's going on in the world, now it became clear. And our rabbis tell us that that's exactly going to happen when Mashiach comes. It's going to be a similar situation. It says when Mashiach comes, and we're going to be questioning. As Jews, we have a lot of questions. In everyone's personal lives, we have questions. Why do these things happen to us? Why do the righteous people suffer? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do children, God forbid, have to suffer? The world is very complicated, and in most cases, the world makes less sense than it does sense. And everybody has questions. Why? But it says when Mashiach comes, God's going to say 2 words. And when he says those 2 words, there's going to be a clarity like there was never a clarity in history. And every Jew is going to say, oh, now I understand. Now it's clear. And those 2 words are going to be Ani Adonai. Yosef says, Ani Yosef. And 22 years of mystery of a life is explained. God is going to say the similar words, but not Ani Yosef, Ani Hashem. And when that revelation comes, it's going to undo every single enigma. It's going to explain and answer every single question. And therefore, we just must be patient in order to wait for that great revelation. In this case, it took 22 years. But when God says Ani Hashem, it's going to explain 5,700 years or 6,000 years of Jewish history. Ani Yosef Ha'od Avihai. The Torah then comes and tells us that Yosef immediately he wants to bring his father down to Egypt. So he tells his brothers, go down, go to Canaan, tell your father exactly what's happening, and then bring him down immediately. And sure enough, the brothers prepared to go back to their father in order to tell them what happened, to give him the good news, to bring Yaakov quickly to make that reunion, father and son. And the Torah tells us that Yosef gave his brothers some advice before they left. The advice was, Al tirgezu badarech, which literally means, don't fight on the way home. Yosef understood the nature. And the brothers are going to go on the way home and start saying, I told you it was your fault, you shouldn't have sold them, you know, it was a mistake, it was your fault, no, it was your fault, and it's going to delay them. So Yosef's saying, please forget about it, it happened already, don't fight on the way home, just get home, go to daddy, tell him I'm alive, bring him back, don't get sidetracked, don't fight on the road. But the Gemara says he told them something differently. He told them, Al tirgezu badarech, don't involve yourself with Jewish law on the road. You know, the brothers are righteous people. So even though they're traveling, you assume that they're learning. You know, they're not talking, they're not telling jokes on the way home. Obviously, they were involved in some sort of Torah. So Yosef tells them, please, don't involve yourself with learning on the way home. The simple explanation is, because if you're thinking of Torah when you're driving on the turnpike, so you get caught up in thought and you end up getting lost. So therefore, keep your mind on the road. Don't start Hidushim, Divrei Torah, and all this business over here. They tell stories of Echam Ezra Atiyah, alav shalom, that one day he was walking to Porat Yosef, and he was talking Divrei Torah, and he was thinking of Divrei Torah, and he's walking, and he's walking, and he's walking, and he finds himself all of a sudden in the middle of an Arab neighborhood. And when he comes out of his trance, he says, where am I? How did I get over here? They caught him, they found him, they drove around till they found him. Chacham, what are you doing here? I don't know. He says, Rabbi, you were thinking of words of Torah, you got so engrossed, you're walking, your feet are taking, you have no idea. So that's what Yosef was telling the brothers, don't think of Divrei Torah, just get home quickly. Another Gemara says he was telling them, don't take big steps. Interesting. Gemara says it's not good to take big strides. The Gemara even says something that's hard to understand. The Gemara says if you take big strides, it's not good for your eyesight. People that take big steps, you lose 1/500th of your vision. It's bad for your eyesight. The Gemara says. So the Gemara says on Friday night, the custom is to look at the Friday night candles, and that brings back the eyesight that you lose from the big steps. So you look in the Kiddush cup, that's why you see them go like this over the Kiddush cup to look at their reflection, it brings back the eyesight. Okay, it's brought down. Don't worry about it. See you worry, don't panic. It's okay. You all do fine. Continue jogging, continue going on the treadmill. It's not gonna affect anything then. We're going to explain it to you today with a different explanation. So according to the Gemara was saying two things. The Gemara was saying, number one, don't learn Torah on the road, and number two, don't take big steps. It's a funny thing to tell the brothers. And they know not to learn Torah on the road. They don't have to get home fast. They don't want to get into an accident. And don't take big steps. Yosef has nothing better to tell them. Don't take big steps. So I saw a nice explanation like this. Yosef was actually chastising the brothers. He was actually giving the brothers a great rebuke. He was giving them a great lesson. He was telling the brothers as follows. You sold me. Now before you sold me, you convened a court amongst yourselves. Like we said, it was a bet din. And you analyze, is he guilty, is he not guilty? Where was this court convened? You were in the middle of the field. You were in the field doing some shepherding, and you saw me, so you decided, let's discuss the sugya of Yosef, and you sat down and judged. And you came to the conclusion that I was guilty, and you killed me. You made a decision on the road. Yosef was telling the brothers, how dare you? Don't you know we have a father, Yaakov Abinu? The greatest rabbi of the generation? You didn't consult with him? You took the law into your own hands on the road, and you made a snap decision? If you held I was guilty, don't you think you should have discussed it with Yaakov? This is the evidence. This is the facts. This is what we hold. Shouldn't you have taken it to the Supreme Court justice? Instead of taking the law into your own hand in the middle of the field? That's how you judge somebody? With such haste? With such a quick judgment? He was telling them, don't judge on the road. That's what your mistake was. And don't take big steps. Don't take big steps. The rabbis understand it to mean that when somebody takes big steps, he's running, he's rushing. Yosef was saying, you rushed. You gave a quick judgment. Where were you running? In the middle of the field. You couldn't wait a day till you got home to ask your father, should we sell Yosef? Shouldn't we? Are we reading the facts right? Are we making a mistake? You didn't ask Gadol Ador. So Yosef was actually giving his brothers Musar, don't make that same mistake again. Don't learn Torah on the turnpike. You don't posek. You don't make landmark rulings in the middle of the road. Don't take big steps. Be patient before you give a judgment. And the truth of the matter is, this is a lesson not only if you're a judge or if you're a rabbi, that you have to be patient and analyze the case, but this is a lesson in life. Because if you think about it, we're all judges. Maybe wrongfully so, but we're all judges because we're constantly judging people. Not in the court of law, but in the court of our minds. We always have opinions on people and things and their actions and their ways, whether we express them or not. But we see somebody walking in the street right away, we have an opinion. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? They should have done it. They shouldn't have done it. They can do it. They won't do it. Even if we don't express it. But any time we see somebody else, automatically we have an opinion. And we have a judgment. And we're learning from this parasha, don't take big steps. Because when the Gemara says big steps impair your vision, they didn't mean your physical vision necessarily. They meant your vision to perceive things. When you're patient and analyze it, then you have a clearer picture of what the truth is. But when you jump to conclusions, your perception, your vision becomes tainted. You don't see things the proper way. How careful we have to be, what the rabbi said, giving benefit of the doubt. How important is it before jumping to conclusions, before reacting? There's a story that is told by the Hachamim. Might have even been a true story, but the concept is certainly true. Of a fellow that had a loyal dog. Dog's a man's best friend. and he was close to the dog, and it was a watchdog, and he had faith in his dog, and so much confidence that he even used to leave his son home with the dog as almost like a babysitter even, which means the dog would protect him, nothing can happen. So he went one day to the city, and he comes back home, and as he walks into the house, he sees trails of blood on the floor, and he starts to panic. And he runs to his son's bed, and his son's not in his bed. And now he runs to the dog, and he sees blood, God forbid, dripping from the dog's... Ladies, I'm not going to tell you bad stories. Give me a good ending. Don't panic. Don't get worried about it. I didn't tell you to a class to tell you bad stories or to scare you. Did I ever tell you a bad story? I always tell you good stories. So he sees the dog dripping the blood. He says, "You killed my son!" And he takes an axe and kills the dog. And then he, with all the commotion, his son comes running in, "Daddy, what happened?" I said, "You're alive?" He says, "Yeah, where were you?" He said, "I fell asleep in the back then." He says, "What is this blood?" He says, "I don't know." And the father goes to the back then and sees a wolf. A wolf that came in from the back, and the dog came and protected his son and killed the wolf and saved his son. But you see over here, when we jump to conclusions, when we act in haste, whether the story is true or not, it doesn't matter, but we do that to people. That's the lesson. Our attitude is kill first and then ask questions. First judge, first knock, first talk, first shamble, first humiliate, first say, and then we'll investigate. And if we're right, beautiful. If we're not right, okay, so I'm sorry, I feel bad. But you're sorry, you killed me already, but you're sorry. You can't say sorry after you kill somebody. Don't take big steps. Be very patient. You never know. You have to be so deliberate in your judgments of people. There's another lesson to be learned over here. We have to be deliberate also before we pass judgment on God. We explained earlier, there are many questions that we have on God. We don't deserve this, Hashem. Your judgment is not fair. And sometimes, as a result of thinking that God is making a mistake or not dealing with us fairly, so we get a little bitter. That might manifest itself, I'm not going to go to shul. What is God doing for me? I'm not going to class. I'm upset at God. I'm angry at God, even if we don't verbalize it. But sometimes those thoughts cross our mind. We have claims against God, and already we're judging Hashem, Chas v'Shalom, as if you're wrong. It's a mistake. I didn't deserve this. And the rabbis are telling you, Hevu metunim badin, be patient before you pass judgment on God, because, as we said many times, in 5,700 years, God hasn't made a mistake. And therefore, even if you don't understand it now, one day you will understand it. There's a saying by one of the Hasidic Rabbis. He said, "I'm proud to say that I have a God that I don't understand." He said, "Why are you proud?" He said, "Because if I understood everything my God did, that means my God is very small. That means the God has an intellect like a human being. Is that a good thing, to have a God that's predictable? That a God that has an IQ of a human being, that you could understand everything He does? That means God is small." He says, "I'm proud to say that a lot of things that my God does I don't understand, because that means He's beyond me. That means He's greater than me. That means He's deeper than me. That means He's beyond me. That means He's above me. But to understand everything, you wouldn't want a God that you understand everything, because that's a small God. That's not a smart God. That's a God that's too predictable. You're limiting Borei Olam. You're shrinking them to human intellect. So therefore the Torah is telling you, Al tifsa'u p'si'a gasa, don't take big steps, not in judging in court, not in judging people, and not in judging God Himself. Then the Torah tells us, Yosef and Yaakov finally meet. And the Torah says when they meet, it says Yosef appeared to his father. And Rashi points out on those words that Yosef appeared to his father. Pasuk says Vayira el Abiv. Vayira el Abiv means he appeared to his father. Rashi writes, as if you didn't understand it, Hu nir'a el Abiv. He appeared to his father. We don't understand why the Torah had to write those words, because it's obvious. If you're coming to see somebody, you appear in front of him. But Rashi's even better. Rashi goes out of his way and says, Yosef appeared to his father. Azak Baruch. That's what the pasuk meant. What did you add for me, Rashi? I didn't need the pasuk. And now Rashi's coming along to tell me the explanation of a pasuk that I didn't need, that it was self-explanatory. Yosef appeared to his father. So the rabbis say a fantastic thought here. They teach us the selflessness of Yosef. Think of what's going on here. You have a father and a son. They didn't see each other in 22 years. Could you imagine the satisfaction that Yosef will have to see his father? Could you imagine the excitement? Could you imagine the pleasure, the benefit that Yosef will have to see his father? It's insurmountable. But there's another angle over here. Yosef is not only looking to see his father, but he wants his father to see him. After all, look how much pleasure Yaakov will have by seeing his son. So there's a selfish story here, and there's a selfless story. The selfish part of the story is, I want to see my father because I miss him. I have to satisfy my need because I'm thinking about him for 22 years. That's the selfish part of the story. The selfless part of the story is, I want my father to see me, to give him the pleasure, to give him the kavod, to give him the honor. Let him enjoy the moment. So the Torah says, Vayira el Abiv. You know what Yosef's intention was when he stood in front of his father? Not that he should see his father to take pleasure. That his father should see him. He appeared in front of his father, which means his whole intent was what? To give his father pleasure in enjoying the moment. To show you what type of selfless Jew Yosef was. He was more concerned about his father's happiness than he was concerned about his own happiness. Hu nir'a el Abiv. He was more concerned about his father seeing him than him seeing his father. He put his agenda on the side. And he was concerned about his father's pleasure. These words are not superfluous. By no means, these words are not extra. These words are teaching us a great lesson. That as Jews, we're obligated to look at our neighbor's situation even sometimes before our situation. Before we even satisfy ourselves, we must try to satisfy the next person. His needs come even before yours. And you see this again in the Perashah. When Yosef and Binyamin meet. When Yosef and Binyamin meet, it says in the Pasuk, they both hugged each other, of course, goes without saying, and it says they both started crying. Yosef is crying, and Binyamin is crying, and simply we understand that brothers miss each other for all those years, you want them to cry, that's the natural emotion. Gemara tells us something else. They were crying for a deeper reason. It says Yosef saw that eventually the two temples, the two Batei Mikdash, are going to be built in the territory of Binyamin, and he saw their ultimate destruction. So he started to cry. And Binyamin saw that the Mishkan, which was the temporary Batei Mikdash, called Mishkan Shiloh, was going to be built and erected in the territory of Yosef. And Binyamin saw that it was going to be destroyed, so he started crying. So look what happens here. Yosef is crying not for his destruction on his territory, he's crying for the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash on Binyamin's territory. And Binyamin's crying for who? Not for his destruction, for Yosef. This is exactly what Judaism is all about. They both had their problems, they both had their issues. But Yosef puts his issues on the side and is crying for his brother. And Binyamin had his issues. Two Beit Mikdash in his territory going to be destroyed. It's a disaster. But he's not crying for himself. He's crying for his brother, for the Mishkan. And what a lesson this is. Because if we had brothers like this, then the Beit HaMikdash would never have gotten destroyed in the first place. If the Jews would learn, this is the way Jews are supposed to act. Selfless people, everybody worried about somebody else, but they were crying because they saw there's going to come a time in Jewish history where Jews are not going to have to get along with each other. That Jews are not going to be concerned about anybody else but themselves. And it's going to be a ruthless generation. It's going to be a selfish generation. It's going to be an I generation, an arrogant generation, a generation of baseless hatred. So they started crying. They said, if only Jewish people could take a lesson from us, two brothers that care more for each other than they care about themselves, then the temple will last forever. But they started to cry because they saw the Jews, unfortunately, are not going to be able to maintain that level. I don't know if you know the Jewish history, what brought about the destruction of the Second Temple. I think it's worthy to just say one fact that is maybe overlooked. I know you know about the Hashmonaim. You learned about them in Hanukkah time, the great family of Matityahu and his sons. They went, they fought the Greek Empire, they rededicated the Beit HaMikdash. Great family. But you have to know that Matityahu had great-grandchildren. They were Kohanim, they were very Jewish. A few of his great descendants, their names were Hyrcanos and Aristobulus. Not the most common names. If you're writing, I don't know how you're going to spell that name exactly. Hyrcanos and Aristobulus, they're Greek-sounding names because they would call like we have American names, they had Greek names, the Jews. These were brothers, and they were fighting for the kingdom. Hyrcanos said, I'm the oldest, I want to be the king. And Aristobulus said, no, I'm the general, I want to be the king, I'm stronger than you. And they were fighting, and there were civil wars, and thousands of Jews died. And as a result of this civil war between these two brothers, Jews, religious Jews, I'm telling you, they're the grandchildren of Matityahu. The great Roman emperor, a fellow by the name of Pompey, he saw what was going on in Jerusalem. He saw the mahloket, and Pompey said, now's the time to go and destroy Jerusalem. And he went in and he destroyed all the walls of Yerushalayim. And you think Hyrcanos and Aristobulus learned their lesson? They still continued fighting with each other, even after Pompey taught them the lesson. And eventually, Vespasian and Titus and all the other vicious Roman leaders came and destroyed the temple. But I ask you, ladies, who invited Pompey to Jerusalem? The Jews invited him to Jerusalem. Compare the brothers Binyamin and Yosef and Hyrcanos and Aristobulus, the antithesis, the exact opposite. Here two brothers crying for each other, and here two brothers killing each other. And those situations like that led directly to the ultimate destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So it was the Jews that invited Rome to come and destroy our temple. And our rabbis tell us if the temple is not built, that means we're still suffering from the same problems. Because if we would have corrected it, then the temple would be built. So it's as if we destroyed the temple ourselves. And that's why in this parasha, when we read about the camaraderie between Yosef and Binyamin, we must self-evaluate our own positions. Do we have such selfless love? Do we have such a ahavat Yisrael, a love of person, a love of the other, like these people? And if we don't, then we're guilty, just like those two brothers of Hyrcanos and Aristobulus. We're inviting, maybe not Pompey, but there are a lot of Pompeys around today. They're just not called Pompey. They're called Saddam Hussein, and they're called Yasser Arafat, and they're called all the other Rishaim that we know. It's the same concept with a different name, but it's the same intent. And we invite them through our disunity and through our strife and through our contention, Jews have to learn to get along. And that's what eventually rebuilds the Bet HaMikdash. I'll just say one more thought. The Torah tells us that when Yosef finally brings his father down to Egypt, Yaakov Avinu now has a private meeting with Pharaoh. And when Pharaoh sees Yaakov for the first time, Pharaoh asks Yaakov, how old are you? And we ask the question, it's a funny first question to ask, how old are you? I mean, for us, we're even embarrassed to ask that question. You never ask a person, how old are you? What do you mean, how old are you? I'm not telling you, it's none of your business how old are you. We'll tell them, what do you do? Okay, I'm a businessman, I'm a rabbi, I mean, how old are you? What do you mean? It's personal, how old are you? We never, in our conversation, how old are you? Exactly, it's too personal, we don't ask. That question will never come up. Even when we have to fill out a form and they ask us for our age, we say, what's their business? Intruding, I'm not answering. And now Pharaoh, he sees Yaakov for the first time. He doesn't know him from nobody. The first question, how old are you? It's a funny question. So I think we gave one answer last year. We'll say a different answer this year. One answer they say is like this. This is not the first Jew that Pharaoh came in contact with. You have to remember that years before Avraham Avinu, he also found himself in Egypt. You remember he went to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh took Sarah, and then why didn't you tell me it's your wife? Or you told me it's your sister. That whole story, that's the same Pharaoh. Now it says Pharaoh in his palace, he had idols all over the place. And he had to the entrance of the palace a very low ceiling where anybody that had to enter the palace, you had to bend in order to walk in. They do that on purpose, so everybody has to bow down to the idol when they walk in. When I was in Egypt, I was by the pyramids, and you see by the pyramids, they were built that way. To walk into the pyramid, the pyramids are tremendous, but the entrance of the pyramid is a very low wall, and they built it on purpose, so when you have to walk in, they would put avodah zarah, so everybody has to pay homage to the idols. So it says when Avraham Avinu walked in, a miracle happened. The door extended, became high, and Avraham walked in like a melech. So Pharaoh sees him. Pharaoh says, wow, it's unbelievable. What a miracle. What? Avraham Avinu. So now, years later, Yaakov walks in. Yaakov walks in the small door. As he gets to the door rises again. Wow. So Pharaoh at first he thought that was Avraham Avinu. And Yaakov looked like Avraham. So he comes along and says, how old are you? You were here already 100 years ago. You're still around? You're still alive? The only two people. He was alive also. Okay, he was also an old man. Because you're still around also. How old are you? He said, no. I'm a different guy. I'm his grandson. This is. But we have the same trick in our family. We believe in God, and therefore Borei Olam makes miracles for all of us. So that's why I was asking Kamaya Mishnah. So now it's a valid first question because he was shocked. He said, two people in my life I saw this miracle happen to. He must be the same guy. He says, no. I'm different. He was more shocked from the miracle than the age. But the rabbis tell us something else. I know I'm going over time, so you forgive me. This is for the week that I missed. I told you I'll make it up to you. The rabbis tell us that Yaakov Avinu went through a lot of trouble in his life. We know it. Whether it was his brother Esav, whether it was his father-in-law Lavan, he had a daughter that was raped, Dinah. Yosef, his son, was lost for 22 years. I mean, Yaakov had his share of problems. And the rabbis tell us that it took its toll on Yaakov Avinu. And although he wasn't such an old man, but he looked very aged. He looked very old. I mean, so old that it was outstanding. That when you saw him, you said, wow, this is an old man. How old is this guy? 1,000? What is he? We never saw an old man like this. The white, the bags. It was something that was shocking. So Pharaoh, when he sees Yaakov Abinu, although it might not have been the protocol to ask how old are you, but the impression that Yaakov gave was it's a very old man. So he says, how old are you? He says, no, I'm not as old as you think, but I had a difficult life. I had problems, and what you're seeing over here is a result of all the white hairs is from the trials and the tribulations that I went through. You know, I'm younger than you think, but it's deceiving my looks. All these looks over here, my problems. He complained a little. And God says, you're complaining? So for every word of complaint that Yaakov Abinu said, God forbid, God took a year away from his life. Yaakov Abinu was supposed to live to 180. But God minus 33 years because of his complaining. For every word of complaint, that's Yaakov. That's not going to happen to us. Don't worry, ladies. Yaakov is a big tzaddik. He's judged on a different level. But I just want you to calculate one thing. It says he complained 33 words, so he lost 33 years of his life. He died at 147. He should have died at 180. But if you count the words, it's only 27 words. The 6 words are Pharaoh asking him the question, how old are you? So the rabbis ask, listen here, I understand you want to punish him for his own complaints. Okay, so take 27 years away. But why should I get punished if Pharaoh asks me how old I am? And the explanation is because you let it take its toll on you. If you let the problems in your life age you, you prompted Pharaoh to ask that question. Jews are supposed to take the problems in life in stride. Jews are supposed to understand that everything is from God. And I'm sure Yaakov did understand that. I'm not saying he didn't, God forbid. But bottom line, it aged him. So to look old, for a Jew, you're not supposed to look old. For a Jew, he's supposed to always be as young as he can, because people that are aged, that's sometimes a sign of you're not dealing with the problems the right way. So God was telling him, you're punished for Pharaoh's question, because he wouldn't have asked you that question if you didn't look the way you did. So here you see, for our level girls, ladies, doesn't mean you have to. I'm not saying to go work out or put on makeup. That's not the lesson over here. It's an attitude we're talking. It's an attitude. The attitude is you can't let life break you. You can't let life crush you. Everybody has problems, but you have to overcome them. You have to have a good attitude. You have to accept it. You have to be solid. You have to move on. You have to have a good disposition. You have to fight it. And Be'ezat Hashem, if that's the case, God will give us long life, arichut yamim, and only good things. Amen.
I have an expression.